Welcome to Movie Speeching. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take good care. 2012 is the name of the movie. Please like and subscribe to get every update. In 2009, unusually strong flares occurred in the sun's atmosphere. This was noticed by Dr. Helmsley, who went to India to talk to the astrophysicist Satnam. Together, they visit a copper mine, where they use an elevator that takes them 11,000 feet underground. In the mine laboratory, Satnam shows Helmsley that the current solar flares are the greatest in history and are causing warming of the Earth's core, which he proves by opening a tank filled with underground water boiling. Fearing a global disaster, Helmsley rushed back to the United States to interrupt an important gala and report the incident to Anheuser, head of the presidential administration. 6 months later, in 2010, U.S. President Wilson announced at the G8 summit about the impending apocalypse. The information has not yet reached the public, but the world's most powerful people are starting to make plans. In the Tibetan Valley, they began building large ships for the selected elite, but they told the locals that they were building a dam. They relocated anyone who couldn't work, and only those with certain skills were allowed to stay. In 2011, Trump tickets were sold to the elite for €1 billion each. At the Louvre, Wilson's daughter Laura meets with the museum director to replace the Mona Lisa with a fake and protect it from fanatics. In 2012, the public still did not know the truth, but television news began talking about the Mayan calendar and the number of people who believed the end of the world was approaching, to the point of committing suicide in groups. Cracks appeared on California streets, but no one took them seriously, blaming it on a small earthquake. At the port, passengers panicked when the ship sank a little into the water. Later that evening, Laura was called by the director of the Louvre Museum, who informed her that they had been lied to about why the work was transferred and that he would appear at a press conference to tell the truth with everyone. Before he could say anything more, his car suddenly exploded and killed him. At the White House, Helmsley and Anheuser informed Wilson that their calculations were wrong and that the end of the world was coming faster than expected. They are interrupted by Laura, who wants to know why the organization she works for is a fake organization. Wilson has no choice but to tell him the truth. Meanwhile, Jackson took his children on a family trip to Yellowstone. They were surprised to see a group of helicopters passing by, and the lake area had been fenced off, but they ignored the warning signs and just climbed over. When they arrived at the lake, they were shocked to discover that the lake was dry and there were dead animals around, while a strange man named Charlie secretly follows them from the forest. The army arrives and takes the family back to their base. Helmsley tells Jackson that they are geologists investigating what happened to the lake and that the area is unstable, so Jackson should take the children with him. After the family left, Helmsley called Satnam, who informed him that he had to blockade the mine and that he had received similar data from other countries. The Earth's crust has begun to destabilize, so evacuations must begin. Jackson and his children go to a campsite when they are cornered by Charlie, who wants to know what the scientists say and scoffs at the answer as if he knows it's a lie. In the evening, Jackson notices Charlie broadcasting from his truck and listens to his radio show, in which he talks about the coming apocalypse. Jackson decides to approach Charlie for more details, and Charlie shows him a silly cartoon about a Mayan prophecy. When Jackson remains skeptical about keeping such a big secret, Charlie explains that anyone who tries to tell the truth to the public dies, which he proves with a series of articles. Jackson notices that a professor he worked with passed away 2 months ago, and Charlie says that the professor sent him a map with the locations of government spacecraft. Finding the idea ridiculous, Jackson returned to his tent. The next morning, the California earthquake worsens, and a large crack in the ground splits a supermarket in half. Fortunately, no one was injured, but Jackson's ex-wife, Kate, called and asked him to take the children home immediately. Meanwhile, Anheuser informs Wilson that only 4 domes have been completed, meaning it won't be possible to save enough people. At a meeting with the leaders of all the states, Helmsley shares a report and explains that they only have 2 or 3 days left, so Wilson announces that they are starting evacuation plans. After dropping the kids off at Kate's house, Jackson received a call from his boss, a Russian oligarch named Karpov. He secretly prepared to evaluate, so he ordered Jackson to take his twins to the airport. One of the boys tells Jackson that he will soon die while he is able to escape on a large ship just before another small earthquake hits the area. Thinking that Charlie might be right after all, Jackson chartered a plane and rushed to pick up his family. Soon after, a stronger earthquake occurred in California, and this time houses began to collapse. Jackson arrives just in time to pick up his children, Kate, and her new boyfriend Gordon. As the surrounding houses collapsed, the streets also began to collapse, so Jackson had to drive like crazy to avoid falling into the hole. Soon, others also tried to escape and the street became crowded, forcing Jackson to drive through front yards and trees until the car crashed from the platform to the ground. The city center, bridges, and skyscrapers also collapsed, killing thousands of people. After a lot of driving, the group finally arrives at the airport and discovers that the pilot is dead. Gordon has taken a few flying lessons but has no experience, so he nervously tries his best and finds a way to get the whole family to leave right before the airport is also destroyed. Soon, much of Los Angeles was destroyed and the sea began to cover all the towns along the coast. A while later, the family stops at Yellowstone to meet Charlie and his map, but Charlie is not in the car because he is waiting at the top of the mountain. Jackson drives the truck up the mountain to find Charlie, only to watch tons of birds fly by and the hills begin to lower. While Jackson leaves in the truck, Charlie stays behind to continue broadcasting as a volcano erupts and blows up the area. Volcanic rock begins to rain down, killing Charlie and hitting the back truck.
Here's how I recovered my hacked Facebook page. First, I
signed a crack in the ground and reached the airport in time. However, he still had to find the map in the truck, which took so long that the floor continued to crack and the truck fell down. Thinking Jackson was dead, Gordon prepared the plane for takeoff, but suddenly Jackson got out of the car at the last second and ran to hold Kate's hand. Once safe, the plane finally took off and left the area before being affected by the eruption. Jackson then checks the map and finds that they need to go to China, so they will need a better plane. In the evening, Anheuser and Helmsley watched news reports about natural disasters happening around the world. Important monuments were destroyed, millions died, and people lost hope. Helmsley believes it is time to tell the truth to the public, but Anheuser refuses until the chosen ones board the ship, claiming it is for survival purposes. They then told Wilson it was time to leave, but Wilson decided to stay and go down with his men. Anheuser receives orders, ignoring Helmsley's protests, and the plane leaves with them and Laura, who receives a final call from her father to say goodbye. Then, Wilson finally made a public announcement to let the world know the truth. Meanwhile, Jackson's group arrives at the Las Vegas airport, where Karpov is also waiting because all flights have been canceled. He brought along the twins, his girlfriend Tamara, and even his dog. Jackson begged Karpov to take his family away, but at first Karpov ignored him. However, when his pilot Sasha finally found a plane he could use, he explained that he would need a co-pilot, and the Jackson family offered Gordon. Karpov agrees to take them all, and they run onto a giant plane carrying cars. Air traffic control tells them they're not allowed to fly, but Sasha and Gordon work together and manage to take off, dodging a series of ruined buildings and only reaching the top of a tower before plummeting toward China. Quack. Moments later, while flying over Hawaii, they suddenly discovered the island was completely covered in lava and hardly any buildings were standing. In Tibet, Buddhist monk Nima received a letter from his brother, who worked with the trunks and shared the truth. After receiving permission from her master, Nima left the mountain and went to look for her grandparents. In Washington, D.C., volcanic ash continued to fall, so Wilson opened the White House to those seeking shelter. When a little girl was looking for her father, Wilson decided to help her and asked for medical staff to come, but suddenly an earthquake occurred in the area and knocked down the Washington Monument. At the Vatican, people gathered to pray at a special mass, which was also interrupted by an earthquake. The building collapsed and killed millions of people. Soon after, there was a report that a tsunami was forming around the world. A cruise ship in the middle of the ocean was capsized by large waves, and the workers could only accept their fate. In Washington, D.C., Wilson awakens in ash among hundreds of bodies, only to see a tsunami engulf the area and kill all the earthquake survivors, including Wilson himself. Meanwhile, Helmsley discovered that the domed base would also be underwater in about 6 hours and that the Earth's crust had moved a lot. The two poles have reversed their magnetic fields and moved so much that the North Pole is now in Wisconsin. Back at Jackson's group, Sasha announced that he was low on fuel and he would have to make an emergency landing. When everyone was ready, Sasha and Gordon began to descend and discovered that there was no more ocean. Thanks to the movement of the continents, the plane reached the Himalayas, quite close to where the domes were built. Soon, the plane lost power and flew so low that it shook. Landing would be difficult, so Sasha asked everyone to get on the bus and go through the loading area. At first, Gordon helps Sasha. The pilot tells Gordon to join the others. The families go out together in a car that lands safely thanks to the snow, but all the other vehicles fly off and crash. Sasha tries to land the plane, but unfortunately, it slips on the ice and falls off the cliff, immediately exploding and killing Sasha. At this time, Chinese cargo helicopters flew overhead and transported animals to the arch. Some officials informed their families and landed to rescue them, but only accepted those with tickets. Karpov left with the children and the dog, but did not with him because he knew that she had cheated on him with Sasha. In fact, he was happy that the pilot was dead. The group wandered for a while until they saw a truck passing by, so Jackson threw a rocket at it to stop it. The driver turns out to be Nima, who agrees to pick them up. Meanwhile, Helmsley's group also arrived in the area and noticed many important people, such as the Queen and her dogs. Only 4 ships were completed, but the third was damaged by the earthquake, and many people like Karpov were still not allowed on board. Helmsley and Laura are disgusted when they realize that among the important scientists, there are many rich people with no skills, but not a single train worker received it. When Helmsley entered his cabin, he noticed that 10 people could stay there, but they preferred luxury. Soon after, he received a call from Satnam, who revealed that there was no plane to pick him up as promised and that a tsunami was hitting his town. So he said his final goodbyes before dying with his family. A panicked Helmsley then rushes to check the new data and reports that they only have half an hour left before the wave hits the dome. Outside the base, Nima arrives with the group, but her brother Tenzin refuses to accept anything other than his family. Kate begs them to at least take the children, but Grandma scolds Tenzin Tenzin and convinces him to take everyone away. The ship prepares to leave, and some people realize that the workers cannot repair the damaged ship, so the passengers on the ship are left behind. Karpov angrily punched the guard to force him through the door, and the crowd immediately followed him toward the nearest dome. However, the train moved away from the platform, causing some people to try to jump. As several people died, Tenzin led the group to the same arch via another safe route. Tamara noticed her dog with Karpov's children, so she whistled for him. The dog quickly walked on a tight leash and reached its owner just before the door closed, and Tamara waved goodbye to Karpov with her middle finger. When Tenzin opened a secret passage inside the trunk for the group, Helmsley watched everyone fall off the platform and couldn't stand it anymore. He contacts the leaders of all the nations and asks them to open the gates so the rest of the people can come as well, but Anheuser interrupts him and points out that they only have 15 minutes before the flood occurs. Waves come. Helmsley doesn't give up and talks about how they are losing their humanity, mentioning what happened to Satnam. When Laura added that Wilson would have opened, the leaders relented and allowed